So this is part 2. We're gonna get into advanced mapping stuff. Typically I've crammed all of this in with like the first session, and as you noticed, those who took the first session, that was already like a lot. So I'm gonna go through a lot and more. So we're gonna touch on previs in 3D, which is kind of an advanced technique, but I wanna show you just good ways to kind of show and figure out where to put projectors and what they're gonna look like throw-wise. A bunch of advanced mapping techniques. So we're gonna do the structured light scan, which I talked about last time, which is great because it gives you a template to look at on your screen of what the projector sees, and then you can kind of just do whatever you want on this and trust that it's gonna be mapped and everything. I'm gonna get into some 3D stuff. So these were 3D printed for a project I'm working on right now, and I'm gonna just like tape them to here and use the 3D alignment, which is in MadMapper, which will be kind of neat. And then content templates, we're gonna talk about line animations, how you can import your own SVGs, input sources, so cameras, control, we'll finally bust out this MIDI controller that we didn't talk about last time, cues and scenes, control, and then finally like making permanent installations or longer term installations. How do I go from, hey, I just set this projector up to, okay, I'm gonna leave now and I don't want my projector with the laptop just like sitting there. How do we publish to either like a 4K player or a bright sign and those sort of things. So first off, I am going to, I think, check in with all of you. So we're gonna start with, we have a projector, we have a canvas, we have MadMapper, and I'll do a yeah, let's hit the lights. It's a little blown out in here, which I think is this one? Yeah, nice. There we go. So, first things first, I'll do like a really quick recap from where we were last time. You're gonna wanna be in test pattern mode in MadMapper. So this is MadMapper on my screen. I'm using a projector, a short throw that's down here this time. We can be adding drawing stuff to this. I really liked this as like a concept board. But again, you wanna make sure your coverage is hitting your canvas before you start mapping, and then you don't wanna touch your projector because if you move the projector, then the mapping gets all out of whack. So that is up top as a reminder, output, full screen mode. You wanna make sure that's engaged. You wanna make sure your show test pattern is there. Show info is helpful as we're getting started, and then video cursor, turning that on. So once we turn off test pattern, I already have some fun stuff mapped over here, but now I can actually see where my cursor is, and we kind of played around with this last time. But so I'm gonna kind of start with adding a few things. I added some paper over here, so I'm gonna map. I know from my test pattern, I have the coverage for it, which typically is just called your mapping coverage. So here, I know I can hit that. I'm gonna go for it. So I'm gonna turn off my test pattern. I have my show info. These look like the top one is a quad shape. So I'm gonna start with a quad and just add a quad here. I don't want that to be my content. So I'll go over to the right side of the screen and pick just a different one of these. Again, if you click one, it doesn't do anything, but you have to hit the little arrow next to it to assign whatever you have selected to that object. So I'm gonna scale that down. Again, I can really see where my corners are here. It helps to kind of get it close into place. And I can pinch to zoom in here a little bit. And then again, my favorite method is clicking one of these 4 corners, and then you can use the arrow key to really finesse it. I like to kind of just like rough it in first. So I'm gonna put one corner here. I'm gonna bring this corner up to there. And bring this corner over here, and then this one roughly here. So I'll move my cursor out of the way, and then again, just arrow keys, hit tab, we'll go to the next one. Okay, so I'm gonna go here, get rid of my messy desktop, and then over here. Okay, so these surfaces, I just did this first one. I'm going to do another one. It looks like the next one's a triangle. So I'm gonna go to the left side here and click add a triangle. And then I'm gonna assign it something a little different, maybe this like barcode effect. I'm gonna scale that down, get this roughly into place. It's gonna snap as well. That snap, if you don't want the snap, is that little blue thing up here. Again, I mentioned last class, there's no like hotkeys or no like hover for like a hint or anything. So you kind of have to like try and learn or look up on the navigation. On the site, I think they have some information there. But for the most part, I'll be telling you as much as I know so you can know what to click and what not to click. All right, so there's another triangle. We got a lot of lines and dots and circles here, so I would go to output and then turn off show info, which cleans it all up and actually allows you to kind of get a better sense of, ooh, I can see there's a little bit of overlap there, so I'm gonna like move that point up. Of course, I don't have show info on, so I'm kind of flying blind, but knowing that it's still interacting here. There we go, turn show info back on, and then deselect. So I have those two. It's hard for me to see from over here, but I do have another triangle. So I'm gonna make another triangle. In this case, I'm just gonna copy and paste that triangle that I have here. So for this one, I'm going to bring this over to here. Sometimes overthrow is actually totally fine. It depends what is past it. Right now I'm like right on it, but if you are casting past this into like a void or a black void or something, it's actually sometimes a little better to cast beyond it, because then you know for sure that content is going all the way to the edge. Let's see, bricks, what's a good effect here? Maybe kind of one of these. And again, these are all the just materials that come with MadMapper, so you can play with stuff not worrying about where your content's coming from. Turn off the info, turn off my cursor. I'm gonna also turn off this background fade that I have going on. So we're just focused on these shapes. Great, all right, I'm gonna do another one. Click and drag this down, I'll turn my info back on. And I'm starting with one point, then I'm gonna click and go down to this one. I'm gonna turn my cursor on so you can follow along. Click and drag this down, click and drag this over. And again, you're kind of looking at your screen, but you're primarily looking at the subject over here of what you're mapping to. And then it's good to get it first, and then you can always adjust some of these bits. So I'm gonna go like that. Let's just pick another, let's do line patterns. That looks a little insane, but let's do that one, that's nice. And then finally I have another triangle. Let's bring that over. Again, snapping in place should be pretty close. If it's not, then I can always adjust manually. Bring this corner over to here. I'll assign that maybe the dunes one, so we get some variation. And then that looks like it's gonna be a quad. So I'll copy and paste this one, bring it down, put on line patterns. Yeah, that's fun. This corner. So your content will disappear if you are warping a quad and you're breaking inside the quad, because it doesn't know how to like render that. Just as a heads up, if you're in this position, you're like, oh no, where'd my content go? It's gone. So let's get this one, bring this point all the way over here. Here we go, kind of give some dimensionality to it with that angle, which is kind of neat. I'm noticing this corner, I'm gonna bring down a little bit so it fits better. Turn off my info. Cool, that's looking good. And then finally we got one more, which also looks like a quad, so I'll copy and paste this one. Bring this point over, bring this point here. Just get something quickly laid out down here. And then this point we'll bring in till I can see it like that. Cool, nice. So now we have a good little thing going on here. I'll turn on off my info. We also have like a space here, but there's a shadow being cast over here. So I'm gonna kind of ignore that one for right now. As we get going, keep in mind on the left side, there's a lot of different things you can do effects-wise to all of these. So I'm gonna focus on this top one right now. There are base color kind of things, so you can actually adjust what the white color output will be. So if I wanna make that red, it will disappear. Let's go with like a blue. Actually, let me focus on this one, because this one's gonna be a little more vibrant directional there. If I keep that white, I can go here and click FX, and then there's a lot of fun stuff in here that color controls is one, but there's also like blur, there's some deform, pixelate, so there's a lot of fun things you can do there as far as like video output. This sort of warp wiggle vertex noise is fun if you have like a whole surface that's helpful to kind of.
Where is that?
I like changing color here, where you can change saturation, you can change contrast, you can change brightness. There's a lot of great ways to just mess around in this and change hue. Like, it's really powerful. I'll also show how that comes into play once we get into MIDI controls and cues and scenes. First off, I'm going to mess around with the line tool because we didn't touch on that at all last class. So we've been mostly doing, in the top left here, you can see these are the quads. We have circle, we have triangle, obviously, polygon shape, 3D we're gonna get to. But this line tool, as soon as you click it, it goes into this line mode. And you'll see the cursor has turned into a little plus sign. I'm going to turn on my video cursor so I can go over here. And now what I can do with the line tool is actually click and drag. Oh, that's to draw. So it's much like the masks. So I click it once if I'm doing straight lines, and then click it again. And what it's doing is it's drawing lines along the edges of my triangles here. So if I did want to keep drawing around here to here, I'll just keep going along my edges. Let me turn all these off here. I'll select these, put it in a folder, so then I can hide that. So now we're just looking at the lines. So if I select that, this is just one full line that I drew. Now when we go into different lines, there's all these sorts of effects. So you can see this is the one line that I just made. You can turn it on and off. I can add more lines. So if I did want to do another one, I just click and add here. I'm gonna go down to here, click once, click again. And you want to keep in mind it's going to animate in the order that I am drawing these. So depending on where you want this effect to happen, you might want to like redraw it or draw each one of these as an individual thing. But for demonstration purposes, this will be great. All right, there we go. So I have two of those line effects. And then what I want to do is there are different effects in here that are actually line animations. So let me see here, active segment, texturing, oops. Maybe it's over in here. That is the effect. So yeah, now I can just draw specific lines. Let me look for input. Active segment, start, end, output. There are some line effects that are really great. Let me just try and see if they spread them out somewhere. Gradient color. Okay, well, gradient color is a good example. So this is actually mapping along the line of the lines themselves. So if I were to do, let me do a new line pattern here, and I'll set them to this, but I want just one line, and I'm gonna turn off the rotate. This will make sense in a second. There we go. So what I'm doing is it's actually, imagine this line that I drew is actually like a straight line from left to right of this content. So anything we put in there is gonna draw along those edges. And there's a lot of fun segments here if we wanna like just adjust where it starts and stops, if we wanna add smooth. There's a lot of like things to mess around in here. Thickness of the line itself. So if I do wanna make it a little thinner, again, this content here can completely change. Let's see, we have a move going on here, but I can slow this down or speed it up so it's like really going crazy. And then this whole layer, we can actually fade brightness down. So this opacity for any of your layers is really important if you're like, oh, I want to blend something over another thing. And then blend mode, you also can change that to say add. So if it is a black and white image or something, then it will blend over the different effects that you have going on. So I'm going to bring that back up a little bit. Great. So just some basics there as far as lines go. Try and find those line effects. There definitely was a whole section of line effects that I'm just not seeing. But they might have just roped it in with, hey, just pick any effect now, which is honestly kind of great. So that's new. All right, so let's see, lines. I did want to talk about, let me get one of my background lines here, which should be, okay, this thing. So I'm going to assign this. At the very bottom of all of your content, there is live input. So from live input, you can use any kind of, either your camera here, so here I am on the screen, and then also over here, which looks confusing because I need to rotate it. So if you wanted to do like an installation, again, I can choose the Brio, which is this camera I set up over here. Let's see if that is working or not. Or maybe it's this one. There we go. Cool. So there's really fun opportunities to do this sort of like dynamic. Let me turn FX on. So this is a great way of also like ramping up the contrast. So here's some contrast adjustments. If you want to ramp up the saturation or not saturation, add some brightness to it. And then when I do pull my hand in here, it's pretty easy to have like a nice interactive installation. So let me turn off the words here, which I think is this one. Nope, not that one. Any of your projector outputs could also be published internal loopback, published to NDI, published to Siphon. So there are ways of really feeding other programs or having this go through different ways. So publish internal loopback is on by default, and depending on your hardware, it might bog it down a little bit, but it's really, really helpful if you do want to kind of pre-comp some stuff. So I'll demonstrate that now. I'll add another projector. Again, I just went over to this projector space here, and I'm just going to call this comp. I'll just go comp 2, and I want to make sure I move it, because right now they're on top of each other. So moving this over is going to mean this is my projector output. This is where I'm kind of composing some things together, and then this is another comp that I worked on that I'll show in a minute. So within this space, if I go back over to my surfaces, top left, and then again, as a reminder, this is where your inputs are visible, input only, output only. Primarily you can work in the output only, but this little sideways equal sign is where you can kind of see both things. So again, if I did want to like crop into some of the content that I have, we kind of went over that last class, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to kind of make like a little bit of a composition. So say I do want to fill this interactive backdrop, but instead of here, I'm going to actually bring it over here. Let's see, paste. And I'm going to bring this video as a backdrop. So I'll click over here, I'll add the Logitech Brio, and then on my left side, I'm choosing how much of that camera I actually want to project onto. So kind of a fun thing of doing is, let's see, I can map this directly to itself, which is kind of fun. And I'm going to just kind of straighten it out over here and use this as a source. This might get a little wonky, but we're going to give it our best shot here. And then if that's kind of in the way, I'm just going to bring this down over here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is take this background and use comp 2 as my input. So the very bottom here, I'm going to source this other one. And now it's looking a little wonky, but it did something crazy. Those lines, okay, so as I'm warping to this wall here, I'm actually going to just engage, turn on, not masks, but I'm going to turn on mesh warping and just get a little weird here with how this is getting mapped, because ideally I can adjust, let's see, this space to where the letters are, and then get a really trippy effect because it's repeating itself right onto itself, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of just stretching out that until it makes sense. Okay, there we go. Whoa. So what it's doing is I'm getting the camera like right where the projector is straight. So when I do something like this, it's going to last a lot longer and do some kind of trippy effects here. So there's a lot we can play around with, but I'm going to skip over to kind of cues and scenes, because once we get some of this stuff mapped, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to control it. So first off, if you were to open up, by default, this could be open already. So this little arrow key here, there's a bunch of different things you can go in here, control list, library, DMX monitor, a bunch of things, but scenes and cues is by default is what's opened. So what I want to do is I'm going to focus on this top area that we just made. So these shapes, we have this group of different things, and what I'm going to do is there's scenes and cues. I'm going to click plus, and that just made a scene. So if you get this to a point that you really like, add it as a scene, and it will put it there as, it'll remember every surface that is there, the position that it's in, and what content is assigned to it. So now I can just kind of adjust things. I'm gonna go in here and I'm going to turn off the lines. I'm going to change this content to clouds. I'll change this one to caustics, this one to barcode, and really just kind of like mess around a little bit with what these are. I'm gonna go, this one we'll do a little square wave, and this one I'll adjust some color, so I'll have this one go to like a blue. Output, oh, actually I should change that in these color settings instead. Okay, so I'll change that to a light blue, and then this top one I'm going to change to one of these line repeats that we were working on. Cool. All right, so now I'm gonna go and click another scene and add the plus button here. And now I have two scenes, so I can say, I can name these, but if I press the play button, it's going to snap back to exactly what I had before. So it's also a great way of kind of saving where you were at as far as scenes go. It will immediately change any position it's in. So if I were to like kind of move these all around, I can make another scene here. When I go there, it's gonna snap those back. So it is a great option if you did want some objects to move. There's animation opportunities here. So in the little cog that opens up, you can say a ease in and out, which is really nice and smooth. Duration, let me say, I'll do 2 seconds, and it's gonna fade between all of these. So I'll say, let's say 2 second fade for that one, ease in and out, 2 second fade, ease in and out. So now when I go to number one, they all animate into place. I have my cool like camera feedback going, which is kind of neat to see it like, press this, it moves over here, camera feedback goes there. And this is literally just tweening between all of these different settings that I've made. So it's a really great way of, hey, I have a whole show that's scripted of what I want to control. I can say this will be like, look one, this is like blue, and this is, we'll call it offset. So you can really like create a show. You can also hit play here and it will just play through your looks. So if you do have like a collection of looks that are lined up, you can choose what the duration is in seconds of each look that it's on. And once it completes one, it goes back to the beginning. Yeah. So now that I have that going, I can either just add more looks, I can do all sorts of things there, but I really want to control it with a MIDI controller because you look way cooler if you're like playing with a controller on stage, right? So let's do that.
That's what it's all about.
Exactly, that's where we're really going. Like a mouse is never what, DJs are on a whole computer with a mouse. So if you go to control list, which is in this drop down here, there's also a bunch up here. If you go to, let's see, view or tools. Yeah, the tools drop down at the very top has a bunch of like all these things. So if that's not open, for example, you can just go to control list. Control list is saying, hey, I want to assign any of these keys to an action or literally anything. So I have a MIDI controller here. Keyboard also works, so I'm gonna do a demonstration just with a keyboard. And the best way of doing this is actually, let me see if I click plus. Oh, this is the learn button. So learn is the easiest way. You could add with like the little plus button here and be like, oh, I want my surface text. No, that's such a waste of time. Click learn, everything changes color, and these are all the things that can be interacted with from a keyboard standpoint or MIDI or anything. So what I want to do is say I don't want this creating advanced, I want to turn that off. The easiest way of doing that would be to click the visibility button next to text and then whatever button I want. So I'm going to press the F key. And now you can see within that, it says the little F key there. And then I can also click this one, and I'll just do G, so I have two different ones. And then once I'm done that mode, I want to make sure I click learn again, because I don't want to be in learn mode, because you'll add a bunch of things and not know why you hit the H key and everything's going crazy. So I click learn again, and now if I press F and G, when I press it, it highlights it. So G, F, G, F, G, F, G. So that's like just a really easy way of controlling things. You can literally do everything. So let's see, learn. If I want to like assign my numbers, for example, I could say, okay, this line's my backdrop, which is currently my comp. I can actually say, okay, select, like assign this comp here, and I'm gonna press that first, and then I'll press the one key, or the one button. And then let's set it to something else. So let's say we want dunes. I'll click that, and then press 2. This is also, you can set it up to select versus just assign it. And then I'll go like this, press 1, press 2, and now it switches content. So it's a really easy way of, immediately changing things. In the same way, I have my cues, right? So why don't I open up the cues that I made, scenes and cues, and then if I go to, let's see here, I can open this up to a new space here. I want to get back to my control list, so I can hit learn, and then these could also be learned. So my MIDI controller, I'm going to, let's see, turn off keyboard. I'm going to go to MIDI, and then hit learn, and open up my scenes and cues. And now I can learn, let's see, play this one, and I'll say that's going to be this button. This one will be this button. This one will be this button. So now I have these MIDI controllers, these top 3 ones. I can either label them with some tape or something, or just remember which one is for look, blue, and offset. And then I want to go back to my control list, and then turn off learn, and then clicking any of these, again, it put it right back to where I had it. So I had the text on there. Here's the 3rd one, which is, it moves things, goes to here. So everything in the program can be like really controlled in that way. Another great way is having a MIDI controller that has little twisty knobs, because then you can control opacity, you can control color, hue, all of that. So for this text, for example, you might want to like mess with that a little bit. So I'm going to hit learn. I'm in my MIDI, and I'm going to first, let's see here. I'll go to opacity, so click into opacity, and then I'm going to twist one of these knobs until it pops up. It's like, okay, acknowledged. Do something with this. This is your interaction to do something with that. Then I'm also going to change, let's see, down in, let me turn off learn. I'm going to turn on FX. So I have all these color things, and I can also learn, let's see, let's add contrast as one. I'll do that, this one, saturation, we'll do the next one, and then brightness we kind of already have, so I won't do that. Okay, so now that I clicked learn again, I'm out of learn mode, and I'm just in visible here. So this now I can twist this and have control over the brightness of that layer. I can control the overall contrast of it, as well as the hue. So let me bring that back down here. Overall brightness. There's a lot of different tweaks that you can do. Oh, hue, I'll add a hue one, because that will help me out a little bit here. Learn, hue, and I'll make that this 3rd one. Cool. So yeah, kind of, you want to remember which ones are which, but now I can control the hue. This is really fun, especially if you have like, a MIDI controller or different buttons that you're sending. This works for DMX and OSC. So if you are adding interactivity from, like a signal input, someone's there pressing a button, that could interact with your sculpture of some sort. So a lot of things to do there. Let's see, pre-composition, control, cues and scenes. We touched on all that stuff. Let's see. Might just take a break and check in with all y'all and see how y'all are doing. I imagine testing out some of that stuff is really helpful. Why don't I do a test of the structured light scan, because that is kind of like the next step that you guys, if you have a laptop or you have a phone, I just noticed it works with like an iPhone, which blows my mind, but space scanner here. So you go up to tools, space scanner is the first thing, and this is what I was talking about, it's called structured light scanning. They call it spatial scanner here. And what you're doing is you have your projector, so projector is projector. The projector itself will output all white for this to start. The source, you want to select the camera that you're using, so that could be your laptop's camera, it could be an external camera, it could be an iPhone camera as well that just wirelessly connects to your laptop, which is pretty crazy. You just click that, unlock your phone. And you want the whole thing in here, but I'm gonna kind of show you what not to do as a good example of what it's gonna look like. So I'm gonna hit capture here. Again, we have like a good amount of lack of ambient light. We don't want it to be too bright, but we also don't want it to be pitch black, because it does help to resolve it. So capture timing, 2 or 3 seconds, doesn't really matter. That's kind of in between the effects, but this is what it looks like. It's also very cool looking once it's going. So structured light scanning does a series of black and white lines that start large, then they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And what it's doing is it is matching the camera output or the camera input to the projector output pixel for pixel. So it is trying to measure the distance of brightness between the white and the black. And in doing so, you can sort of see how in here, it's seeing how that angle is bumping out. What it's gonna do is move that pixel, like shift everything so it is literally gives you a 1080p image that is your projector output. So if you mount your projector somewhere, you lock it down, you do a structured light scan, and as long as you don't touch your projector, you can use the template that comes out of this as a template for whatever you want. So you can bring that into After Effects. That's what I do for a lot of different things is I'll start with a photo and I can animate to that, and then I'll take a structured light scan, and then I'll warp all of my my composition in After Effects to the scan, and I know that the mapping's gonna be like dead on. So it does vertical, then it does horizontal. All right, so it's almost done. It takes about a minute if you don't mess it up the first time. All right, let's see. So I'm going to, here's like a testing here. I'm gonna add a little folder, call it scans, and then I'll say scan 1. Blam. Wow, something's going on there. Okay, so let me go to our workshops, mapping, scans. So there's our scan. It's got a transparent background. You can see these lines here are like not too bad. I'm gonna go back to here and turn off our effect back there, and then I'm just gonna really just turn all this off so I can mess around with, see what we're actually doing here. So this is actually not too bad. I can do a second scan. It's clearly losing some data in this top section right there, probably because it's just at a harsh angle for the projector. But this is also pretty good enough that I can, if I have these lines here, I can actually zoom in here. Again, I don't have to look there. I can adjust these lines on my computer because that is the background for this. So even here is like, oh cool, I can adjust these spaces, bring this one over, and then when I do check my actual surface over here, it's mapped. Again, I lost a little bit on the top here, primarily because the camera was cut off. So highly recommend kind of testing out some of these. The actual scan on your projector, if you go back to the top left corner here, click your projector here, it's set in here, so your background. So you can also adjust that brightness. If you're like, oh, I want to fade my background away, if I want to make a mask for this, you can also add more if you took your own scan or a different scan. Really, really helpful, because then you're not flying blind. That said, I'm gonna do Space Scanner one more time just to demonstrate. And then this time, I'm going to kind of pull this back to get at least the whole top here. I'm gonna adjust this up. Okay, so that'll get me the top left corner. It's also gonna get me some info over here, because I was missing that. Hit capture. And we'll go through that another minute. Again, this works really well when you have your projector locked down. If the projector moves, then you're kind of screwed a little bit as far as you can't trust it 100%. But again, another scan and not being in the way of the projector like I just was is good too. So you want to stay away from the projector output as well as the camera. So if you are in a gallery, you want to make sure people aren't walking by it, because you want the scan to be just focused on the lines that it can see and figure out. I'm also curious that the reflection of the tape I'm seeing on the table right here is probably doing some weird stuff. There's literally a thing of tape there. But giving it unless you're working on a flat, like a mural, for example, is a great, you can take a picture of that, use it as a background to make something, and then adjust that to a scan once you get in place, which I've certainly done before. And then what's great about that is I'm actually typically exporting my final files out of After Effects, because again, I have this file right here, so I can bring this ping into After Effects and animate whatever I want onto that. And with this as my backdrop, I can export that video. This is literally 1080p, or it should be. Let's see. Yeah, 1920 by 1080. And that file, put on a player, connect to HDMI, and it is going to be pixel perfect. So I'm going to make this one scan 2, and we'll see what that looks like. Nice. All right. So here's the difference of the two. You can see my projector hasn't moved, but I'm filling in a little more data as far as This one definitely got a little bit more of the surface. This one got some, probably the reflections of the tape that I didn't remove, messed some of that up, but there's more data here. So I'm actually gonna do a quick jump into Photoshop just to demonstrate adding these. Yeah, that's like the really useful part once it opens. Okay, so let's open this up. All right, so I'm gonna just select this, bring it over to the other one. I usually hold down Shift. Yeah, I don't think you have to hold down Shift anymore. But what you wanna do is change this to lighten. Instead of, screen is gonna blow it out, but lighten is gonna take all of the lighter information and just add it to that. So now I have even more information and I can just flatten these. Yeah, I'll just do flatten image. Actually, I want that to be, I'll just do a save for web. Let's make this transparent just for fun. And then I'll call this scan 3. So my combined scan, again, you can combine 10 of these if you want. Just set them all to lighten and that'll do it. So now I'm gonna go back over to my projector output and I'm gonna go down to my scan. Instead of scan 2, I'm going to, uh-oh, where'd that go? It went into a different folder, of course. That went to a random folder. Okay, let's go here to here to here to here to here. And then scan 3. Sure. Cool. Now I'll take that in here. Okay, so now I have like more visibility of what I'm looking at for a background. Again, I can fade that down, but it's a really great way of having a template for your surfaces. So as we kind of get going here, I would recommend doing a structured light scan once you have your projector locked down and then you have something more to kind of play with. And I'm gonna walk around and kind of check out what everything is going on, and then I will do the 3D test, which will be, we have a 3D printed model, and I have a 3D file that we use to print it, and you can use that in the UVs of the 3D file to align to a physical object. So we'll do that in a minute. Yeah, let's turn this back on for fun. And yeah, cool. So I'm gonna walk around, just make sure everyone's kind of getting stuff set up. Another good tip that I haven't shown yet necessarily is at the very bottom of each one of these shapes is something called soft edge. So this is really helpful if you're blending projectors together, you're blending outputs. There's actually ways of doing it in the projector itself with different masks and blends. But if you did go down here and say I want my, let's see, text, and I'll do this lines background here. Let me ramp this brightness up so I can see this harsh line here. A lot of the times, my recommendation would be to avoid any things that makes it feel too much like a projector has like an edge to it, and you can adjust that by going to the bottom, enabling soft edge, and then you can control like the right to add like a fade on it like that, or like a top fade, bottom fade. So I'm actually like creating like a gradient to fade in all of the edges. And you can control the power of each one. So if I wanted it to be like more or less, it really, really helps to just say, oh, I want to fade this. The best way of doing it, if you're like, I don't want the output here at all, I mentioned this last class, but getting photofoil or just physically blocking the lens is going to give you the best quality fade. If there is, like Spencer's is going to be a great example. If you can't really see it, the back, like the overthrow, but if it was dark enough in here, you could absolutely see like a really faint line around. That would be like adding some masking to the physical projector, so it just fades off around the output. Yeah, so I won't touch the projector, but say you don't want on the backdrop there, adding like a physical block like that is really, really nice way of like blocking, physically blocking it. On this projector here, either like some gaff tape or again, photofoil is like kind of fireproof, but just putting a little bit in front of the lens where you don't want it to, obviously just enough where it's not going to block your projections, is a really, really professional way of like cropping in on the top and cropping in on, you know, really nice of getting that like true black fade. There's so much in this program to go over. It's so funny. Like every time I'm teaching a workshop, it's like, oh, also this one, or someone asks a question. So if anyone's curious about anything in here, there's all sorts of settings you can go through. Masking we did last class, that's really helpful. Mesh warping as well. Any of that is very, very useful. Let me get this last letter up and we will play with some mapping. Cool. I'll try not to. Yeah, those look on there. Okay, so let me turn this off and I will do some 3D mapping. Cool, all right, so I'll show you guys a little demonstration of using a 3D object to map. Typically this is the question I get all the time is like, oh, you need a 3D model to do like 3D mapping. Most of the time you don't. Like all of this we've done already is pretty much 2D mapping. But I'm gonna add one of these 3D objects. The default, if you go over to the left here and click the 3D object, is a cube. So if you happen to have a cube, like this pedestal, that's a really great way of testing this out. I'm gonna change this to maybe one of these kind of effects here. So this is doing a 3D visualization of a 3D object, so like an OBJ. So anyone that has skills with Blender or 3D programs is really gonna potentially like this a lot. And if not, someone will learn 3D eventually. So I previously made this stuff. These are 3D objects, the letter E, L, and V. This is from a project that I'm working on for the Evel Knievel Museum that is moving to Las Vegas. So we are gonna make these letters all in a line, and they're gonna be about 8 feet tall, like in this giant atrium thing. But for a good example here, because we're gonna be projection mapping like faux neon and stuff in it, is they 3D printed here in the lab, and we're gonna align this. So the best way of aligning this actually is, I can get it close, but the best way of doing this is actually, on the left here, there's a calibrate. And what I'm gonna do is turn on my video cursor so I can see what I'm looking at over here, and I'm gonna click calibrate. And what I'm gonna do is each one of these 3D vertex points, I'm gonna click and drag to the 3D model. So that one goes about there. This one here, I'll zoom in so you guys can see a little better. Take this point, drag it to here, and much like the structured light, it's trying to like figure out what the output is and where to go. So once I get enough of these points close, it will start to snap to a 3D model. Let me get this one in, and it should start to snap once I get that one here. And I'll bring this one to here. Error still. Okay, well, I'll move this one to this point. There we go. And it just snapped. It just auto-mapped to the 3D object because it had enough data. So I can add, it just says, let's see, error pixels, 2 pixels. So I can fix calibration if I want to like add this point or a different point in. Let me see here, E. Let me also say 3D E, so I know what this is. Edit calibration, so here are my current points. If I did want to adjust, again, I can click each one of these and adjust them, but why don't I move I'll do another letter here. One of the things I wanted to point out is this is using a 3D map. So this is made in Blender. This is like a 3D UV map of the object itself. So why don't I just open that up just to show. It's a little beyond kind of the scope of this class, but it's really helpful to know how I'm creating, like why is this showing up here. I'm going to turn on I'm gonna bring into my Evel comp over here because one of the things I did was make a pre-comp for 3D. And what I did is in Blender, my 3D model where I have all 3 of these meant to be like in a line basically, the texture over here is unwrapped to a specific way. So if I were to take this E here, select all of it, this is much like what we're doing in MadMapper, our input and then our output. I'm saying for this 3D input, take the front face of it, put it here. So on this square map, anything I put here is going to be on the front face of the E. Anything I put here is going to be on the sides and edges of the E. I can unwrap this further to like take all of those flat edges and put them out as like a line. There's a lot of different ways I can unwrap this, is what it's called. Same with, I go to the L here, that's over here. So if I were to select all of these, I unwrapped them next to each other. So if I wanted to have one canvas that goes across all the letters, that unwrapped here. So again, it is a lot of like prep to get a model ready, especially if you're 3D printing a model and then mapping it. But what I'm going to do is get to getting the other ones in here. I'll turn this 3D surface off. Well, we have one letter, so that's cool. I'm going to take that letter and I'm going to assign it the 3D pre-comp that I have. So over here, again, these are like all my projectors, right? This bottom one for my outputs was a comp that I made for this background. This one over here is a comp that I'm making. Let me go over here to show you. The evil letters comp, and then I'm using that as a comp for the letter itself. So the material you'll see, the front face of it, is pulling from the top half. And if I want to adjust that a little bit, I can pull this down a bit. So I'm kind of like, I'm making let me get this strobe here. I'll speed this up. So the front face is going to glow, and the edges are going to have this cool line effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring another 3D model in here. Again, I don't want it to be the E because we have another letter next to it. So let me go to the left here. I'm going to bring in my other 3D model, which is a V. And then likewise, I'm going to bring it down close. It doesn't really matter where it is because I'm going to do some adjustments to the calibration here. Okay, so I'm going to go down to calibrate. Again, go to a point. I'm going to click that, look at the model itself. That's going to be the top left. I'm going to go here to the top right. Again, I can look at the shadow as well to try and get this locked in. I'm going to go to the very bottom here. Again, this is a great example of how I have all these individual letters that I just taped up here willy-nilly. But once I use this, I can snap them into place. Let's see about there. Hasn't snapped yet, so let me go here to this one. There it goes, now it's snapped. So it needs about 6 points or so, maybe less, but it's trying to get, again, like an example of where those points are in 3D space to assign this 3D model to. So now those are good. I can turn off my info layer. Let me see, output, show info. And that one is done. So I can just click off of that. Cool. So again, I can adjust that a little bit. I'm seeing like it's not quite perfect on those edges, so I can go back in here real quick. Get to my V surface here. I'll go 3D V, and then I'll say fix calibration. Whoop. Back to V, 3D. Edit calibration, and then bring these points up to where they need to be. It's about there, and then bring this one down a little bit. Very finicky. Yep, there we go. Cool. Now I can just click off of that. So I will do that again, just get the rest of these in here, and then we can, I already have a V, I will get the E in here again. Scroll it down. Hey there. Calibrate, bring this point to this top, this point. Again, it really helps to have this video cursor so I can actually see a little bit more about where I'm aiming this. And then when I get this next point, it should snap into place once we Get it close enough. There we go. Okay, and then I'll name this one 3D2. All right, and then I'll do one more, which will be the letter L. L. Scroll this down, warp it a little bit. And I want you guys to know this. It's definitely an exact, not a perfect use case, but there is a 3D printer in here, so you could do a 3D building, like really anything that you wanted to map specifically to a 3D model, print it like we did here, and then use this as a tool to create it. It's also funny, I feel like I'm way more comfortable with the 2D mapping stuff, that arguably I could do this faster if it was 2D mapped. But having, oh, there we go. Did that do it? That looks a little weird. Real close. Bring that in. Seems to be trying to get it in the right place. Well, that's pretty close. Let's see how that looks. And you can literally do it for every single point. I think it definitely gives it more information. All right, let's keep it to that. Cool. Let's turn off this cursor. Let's see how we did. Not bad. There's definitely some funkiness going on here. Again, if you have a larger 3D model or like a smaller focus projector, we only are dealing with a very small amount of pixels here, so it really can't do too much. But yeah, 3D object that was printed, that, you know, this output here, if I were to click, select all these letters, let me see here, 3D, these ones. This is now my input output. So you can see the top and the bottom here. Over here is kind of where I have that pre-comped. So if I did want to change caustics, then the front is going to be all that. This bottom layer, let's see here, let me just put this to noisy barcodes or something. So there's a bunch of different ways of doing a ton of different things here. Again, changing colors. I still have all my color perspectives here if I wanted to control that. Let me get saturation in here. Let's get some hue. Let's go with like a yellow. And then the bottom could be these line patterns or something. Cool. So yeah, just another way. There's so many different ways to do things. So depending on the project you're working on, this could be an application where you're actually outputting in this way to 3D objects, or if not, 2D works really well as well. So just another tool. There we go. Yeah, so I'm gonna show, let's see here, how are we on time? Almost 4, great. Another thing I wanted to show, speaking of 3D, is pre-visualization. So I mentioned this at the very beginning. I want to show a couple examples of how previs is very helpful for you and then also for a client. So this is for a project I did in December for Cancer Center Fred Hutch, and this was their gala. This is the space that we were given in the Sheridan. And I literally built this whole 3D model to create like a build design for production with FigurePlant was our partner that worked on building all these physical walls. But what was also really helpful was, I'm gonna fly down in here, and we had these ultra short throw projectors. And here's an example of what the lensing looks like. These are really, really short throw, obviously, much like we've seen kind of casted around. But I wanted to really test for myself, like, what kind of a canvas do I actually have here? What can I design size-wise, content-wise? So this was really helpful to actually know where I would need these projectors hung, which is actually like a foot above the height of the walls. So we had to build custom kind of trussing to get over it. And then to also know, okay, I'm gonna have this amount of coverage on these like wood canvases that I also designed. So it was really, really crucial to have these as like a previs space. Zooming over here, this was a place we called the Reason Room. So this was actually vertical rear projection screens that are turned sideways, and we like connected them all together. And these were all animating with all these different reasons for why people donate, why people are involved in cancer research or funding, all of that. And how we ended up doing this was, if I were to, it's also fun in Blender just to fly around. But these are all trusses back here. It really helps me to figure out logistically, like, do I have enough space behind this wall for the throws itself? So I'm gonna turn on, let's see if these are them. Yeah, so these are like the actual projection. Again, you can go to projectorcentral.com, or like these are Epson models, so I double checked with the Epson throw. But this is exactly how it all worked, and we had it all set up, attached to these trusses in portrait mode, ultra short throws, and it allowed us to actually get this sort of display behind without any shadows being cast. So when people were standing in this space here, they were just glowing. You couldn't see how it was happening. It kind of looked like these big screens, but there were these like 11-foot tall, screens that were really, really helpful for that. I think, let me see what other projection we did around here. We had these like windows you could look through. It was like this really experiential thing. And then we had these kind of LED lighting that was not controlled with MadMapper, but really draw people through the space. Another previs I want to show is this one I'm working on now. For a mural, so I'm not even projection mapping a mural, I'm projection tracing. So they have this 3-story building that they are figuring out, how the hell do we trace a mural in a space? So you'll see on the left side here, let me select it. This was basically me figuring out, how am I gonna do this? This is like a basically cross-section of this building. And if I zoom out, this is what the building actually looks like. I was given this model from architects and then could figure out, okay, I'll bring in these actual size projectors and everything, and this really helps to figure out, like, how am I gonna put a projector where to project for this mural. So for example, you can sort of see what our overlaps are like. I can see, okay, I need a platform, I need a projector that's gonna be on this specific model of like a stand. So these are like a Kupo slider stand, and then I have some taller ones here that are like a combo junior stand. Like, I needed to make sure that these are in the right place, and 3D is a really great way of figuring that out. So again, this is like, I don't have to worry about the tracing necessarily, like someone else can get on it's gonna be like a scissor lift basically, going up and tracing. But again, ultra short throw is like, there's no real other way to do this in a space that's as tight as this. Another way of doing murals is like a pounce pattern, where you're creating the pattern actual size on big pieces of paper, cutting basically tiny little holes, and then you're hitting like dust against the holes to make a trace on the wall. But the artwork for this is like all one piece of art. So I'm gonna map different sections of it. Again, talk about using projection mapping as like a whole different use case that isn't like an EDM show or like a light art installation, but for like a practical purpose of how do we trace a mural. Another great use of this is, you can be standing right in front of this to trace it, and the light is cutting in front of you. So if you were to project from behind you, you're casting a shadow, and you kind of have to like get out of the way of it. So even this, if I'm tracing here, I'm casting a shadow from my own hand. Ultra short throws, or even this, is a regular short throw. So it's a 0.5 lens. It is casting quite a bit, but I can get in here and the light will still get kind of underneath me. So yeah, portrait mode, I've been really excited about ultra short throw in portrait mode as like a way to kind of get around or like get light around things. Let me see if I can find, I don't know if I have it saved in here, but let's see, that's Google Drive. I have another light installation I did with an artist, Human Homebody 3D. Yeah, here we go. This is very fun. So this was actually a large exhibit we did a year ago now with this artist Human in Oakland. And I'm just gonna zoom out here because it was like a multi-room exhibit. And it was really helpful in this giant warehouse to actually figure out where these are all gonna go. So this was like a room here. These are like projectors that I'm outputting. I think I actually set up some things here. So this I added like a point light to actually show what the shadows would look like in this space. These are all hung scrim, like organza that was printed on with her artwork, and we projected, and there was some transparency through it. So this was like a simulation of really like what it could look like shadow-wise. And I'll show you what it ended up looking like after, which will be pretty cool. And then we had this room here, which was really neat as far as all of the artworks. We had these projectors hung. These are called light scene projectors, which are, they're built for like exhibit design. They look really nice. They just look like little black spotlights. You can get them in white as well. And this was me testing the throw and again, giving a plan to an integrator so they can just be like, okay, cool, I need this 6-foot pipe and this is gonna attach to that. That way I'm not the one having to do everything. Here's the plan. The projector goes here, these hang here, and you have flexibility with zoom and focus and all that. So we had 10 of these projectors in here, also projecting on some scrim. And then we had this room over here, which had this crazy 3D face that's like concave, but you can even see the effect now, it like follows you around. So I was projecting inside that 3D object, which was also like 3D printed out of a massive 3D printer in foam, and I projected these like forward and concave lighting. So it was kind of popping in and out as you were walking by. It was really neat. And then we did some ultra short throws to fill this room with really bright projectors. And same with this room, we had a media server that was powering these 3 projectors. And then each one of these was actually, has playback on board. So this was a use case where I actually did essentially a structured light scan and exported an SD card that just went right on it. So all these needed was power. It was really, really clean. Each one had its own loop. They weren't synchronized. That was fine. It was undulating, that sort of thing. I'm going to pull up a view of what that actually looks like. So if I haven't said, I run my own studio, called Winslow Studio, and we've done a bunch of these projects. I've worked independently for the past 10 or 12 years now on all sorts of different installations and products. Website is now loading. And yeah, I'll show the Homebodies exhibit because that one, again, those 3 massive rooms was really great. Load faster, please. Can go right to Homebody. Yeah, this was also really helpful because I was given the lighting grid information. Again, this I mentioned kind of the last class, but these are very useful tools, like a laser measure. Even if someone gives you dimensions, like doing a site visit, taking your own measurements is really, really helpful. This is a laser rangefinder, which I also showed last class, but if you are in a very bright environment, if you are outside and you're like, I know I'm gonna be on this rooftop to project on that building, this you can look through at the building and press the button and it will give you a exact distance from you to that surface. Very useful. I also mentioned the use case for these is usually hunting or golf. So projection mapping is just another use case. I got a nice Leica one because it seemed to be not hunting or golf related. Website really killing it right now, huh? Oh, here's a bunch of. Let's see, what else? So bright sign. Another thing, setting preferences is a really great thing. So you have this permanent installation, say I have it baked out onto a player. The great thing about these players is if you lose power, you get power back. They're built to just iPlay output. Projector is, listening for output. It's good to go. If you are running MadMapper, like we're running here, you want to make sure that you're looking in settings here. If your projector, if your laptop is turned off and on and off, you want to set your file that you've saved to like open it, login. There's a bunch of different things you want to enable. General startup here, I can say full screen at startup, which is really important. So again, if I do enable this, Command-T is the way to get out of it if you don't have a projector hooked up. So typically, I only want to enable that when I'm like deploying a MadMapper kind of program. If you are outputting multiple projectors, that's also totally fine. There are other hardware bits, like a data path is a great tool to take one output, like a 4K output from your laptop, and then it will output 4 dedicated 1080p's. So instead of, like Mac's a real finicky thing when you're connecting like all these dongles and outputs can swap, and you really don't want that. You want them to be like set. Again, if one of these projectors switches, you have a mannequin on a flat board, it's really gonna be obvious. So investing in like a data path, those are like $2,000 now, and it's just for like outputting things. But again, for a permanent installation, it does get a lot more expensive than something as simple as like projector and a player if you're doing multiple projectors that need to be synced together. Your startup, you can use like TeamViewer to like kind of cloud control in to like see if your projector or your installation is running okay. BrightSign also has what's called BSN cloud service. So if I were to go to my BSN, or is it BA connected? I have an installation at the Winchester Mystery House, for example, and we have 2 BrightSigns there. And it is $100 per player per year. So it does add up, but billing that to a client is part of kind of a maintenance contract. You can see I have 5 of these are up. 1 of them is in this box, so that's why it's down. I'm always stressed when I see that. Like, that's not good. Network status, so the interface of this is like very bad, to be honest, but it works. So I have Glow. This is a permanent installation that is in SF. Once my site loads, yeah, there we go. I'll show these. Glow, so this is a permanent one, Motilla blend. These are in McMinnville at a winery. These are deployed to these different things here. So I can see they're all up. If I want to publish an update, I can literally go into schedule and I can change things. It's not as nice as like fade between these 2 things, but it is very robust and very trusted as like a platform. And it's been up for years now, which is great. I transitioned one from Lightform, which I mentioned last time. That was like a really great all-in-one tool, but Amazon ended up purchasing them. So they have sunset their products and they're building something that I don't know about that they are hopefully gonna be really cool there. But unfortunately that means that, it works really well, but is not necessarily supported by them at the moment. So transition those all to BrightSign, which is great. Okay, I'm gonna show some things. So this is the grand ballroom illumination that I just mentioned. I'm gonna pull up, not Glow, but Human Homebody. You can sort of see the backdrops here. This was a really fun project that blended a lot of, how many projectors did we have? We had 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 projectors total. And Epson helped out, which was great because that costs a lot when you're doing like a 2-month-long exhibit, and rental fees. If you are renting bigger projectors, you can expect like a weekly fee to be anywhere between like $2,000 and $3,000 for one very bright projector. Again, if it's like 8,000 lumens versus 15,000 lumens or 20,000 lumens, it really depends kind of what scale you're working with. Loading? Yeah, it's loading. Sorry, website really it's slowing down right now. You can also use BrightSigns without this $100 a year thing. You just have to be local on the network that it's connected to. So the way these work is they have an HDMI out. BrightSign also has a bunch of different, here I should just bust out their website while mine's loading. There are a lot of different players. Typically, you won't really need super overkill. Let's see. I know Nandini ordered a few of these, so if you did want to like do a permanent installation or familiarize yourself, they are super robust. The HD5 is what these are. They have one output for HDMI. Again, you can use two, and they synchronize on the same network. There's also these really nicer ones that have like 4 outputs, so if you really want to go for it, these are really nice. They control video walls as well as projectors. Basically, any sort of playback on a screen. Yeah, these ones I can control over their cloud service, so any of these I can, if they have an active internet connection, you can control. They also have a bunch of different, clearly they're very focused on their own products, but they have a lot of other CMS, and there are ways you can just push directly to an HDMI feed. So if you have like a feed to your server, it can just directly pull some sort of content that is either directly streamed, like a video file, and it's just pointed to that, and it doesn't necessarily even need its own software to be updatable. So I honestly don't know too much about the different CMSs. I looked into it, but most of the other CMSs charge you as well. So like, oh, I'll avoid the $100 fee by paying $250 somewhere else. You know, it's like, that's great, but if the benefits aren't, I can fade things or, okay, my website should be loaded by now. Or not. Project Homebody? There we go. Okay, so here's some of the kind of result from what we were showing in Blender, where I was able to show, you know, the 3D spaces. This was like a hallway you walked through. This is like the face with the panorama that you could walk through. Again, we used ultra shorts, so you didn't really cast a shadow unless you were right up against the wall. They had some AR components to it. This is that like immersive space there with the printed gauze, and I'm just gonna kind of scroll through some of this. So this was actually all painted on the wall. So Human, she did all of this as a physical painting, and then I did mapping to actually animate the clouds themselves and then animate the sky separately, and had birds flying through. Here are the 3 different rooms. So we had this collaboration room, we had the chrysalis and isolation. You can kind of get a sense of like what these all actually looked like. But again, this face was just so, this was projecting like an inverted light into the face that was already concave, so it was kind of like playing with a bunch of that. Yeah, it was really satisfying how that all came out. But yeah, it all started as this kind of 3D model to kind of show a plan for like where the projectors go and all that. So previs is very, very valuable. Definitely takes getting used to Blender and figuring out all these lens corrections and all that. But let me see, all this content templates, I wanted to touch on that really quick too. I'll use the evil letters as an example. So if you were to take just collaboratively, you know, with either the structured light scans that we have, or with, let me see if I still have that one here. So this could be, you know, if it looks a little cleaner, we do a couple more scans, the projector's locked down. This could be sent around to all of us, and everyone can animate whatever they want onto it, export a video, and then contribute to like a greater kind of group project using this as a template. So thinking about how to use templates is really helpful in the way that, you know, if I export this as a ping from Blender, anyone can animate, you know, in After Effects or Premiere, whatever they wanted, into where the letters are, and then animate. It automatically will sync up. So having a shared content template is really great for collaboration versus one person in a computer like this. Hey, I mapped this here. You know, someone else could potentially just swap out and open their own Mad Mapper with either the shared shapes here and maybe do their own thing. So there is kind of like a, you know, you could kind of do more of like an improv where you're like starting one thing, someone else messes with something and then adds another scene and adds their name to it, and then you can autoplay, like pretty easy way of getting like a group show going on one canvas. But yeah, creating like what's known as a content template is really helpful for that. I'll go back to Keynote because I know there's a couple things in here that relate to that. This project was one of the first things that I did when I got into mapping, which was just 2 blank white shoes hanging on what looks like a pedestal like that. One projector at a high angle that could hit the top surface, but also hit the shoes that weren't casting a shadow. This was my rough content template. So left side, right side, top, and anything that I animated here would be lined up with the top. And it's basically my guide. So I can use the input to assign what goes where, and any video that I make is gonna be all synchronized together. So this was something I did in Blender where I actually was rendering it from the perspective roughly of the projector, and then could warp it to the surfaces of the model itself. And it's like a little crude, but it worked really well for the effect of goo. And that kind of looks like these kind of straight on views. So this was like a render of just the side and composite it all together, and that worked really well. So that's really helpful. Again, some other things here. Let's see, amplifying contrast, just some tips and tricks I wanted to show, and then we can keep kind of working on some light maps here. This is by Red Paper Heart, kind of a great example of projecting in a white space. You can see how it really glows and the light bounces really nicely. So that is sort of one effect if you want that kind of like overall brightness. The way light reacts with a white surface is that it, it bounces. So if you wanted a higher contrast, they actually updated this a year later and did like this line painting sort of effect. So you can already tell it's like much more high contrast where they're only projecting white in the white parts, and then black, they're projecting nothing or black. It's less bright and glowy in there, but much more like, crisp it feels, or more like moody and depth aspects to it. Yeah, like this sort of effect here is less like, oh, it's just blown out space. So definitely think about that. If you don't want to project on something, just make it black. This was something I did as well when I saw this old ad. This inspired a whole other project called Light Capsules for me, but this is just a black and white ad, and I took a picture and just animated only the white parts of it, and it just felt really, really crisp and really magical versus projecting in the white as well. Simulating projection, this is something I kind of touched on a little, but if you have this is my ghost sign restoration project, Light Capsules. If I have a version of it and I set this light to add mode, it's literally like light is additive. So the word add in blend modes of Photoshop, lighten or screen will simulate projection really well. So if you did want to see like an example of like a color photo, set it to add mode and you'll see how a lot of the dark tones will fade out. It's kind of, I feel like one of the most common questions is like, oh, can we project this like brown shoe? And like brown is going to be very, very hard to project. You're going to have to create either like light around it, like a white glow to define what the brown is or the darkness to it. So it's something worth thinking of. Like you can't project black. You can only create a dark space and then go brighter from there. Perspective specific, so a lot of this stuff has been like very buzzwordy or not buzzwordy, but like very seen over the years on YouTube, and like, oh, this cool 3D crumbling building. They do look very cool, specifically online, because a camera has a one-point view perspective. In real life, your eyes can see that the depth isn't actually crumbling. So it's just something, not necessarily bad, but it's something to be aware of, that if you can control the view perspective of like a crowd is right here and I'm going to see the building, that's great. But if your crowd is from a far angle, then the effect isn't really going to work as well. Same with this, like all of these cool sports modes are built for broadcast. So this is like the view that every camera shown is seeing. But someone on the other side of that is getting a terrible experience because they're seeing this super warped backwards effect, like not really resolving well. So while this looks amazing, it doesn't look as well for the other people. So this is kind of an effect of that. Like if you were straight on, it would look like a disco ball, perfect disco ball rising up out of the ground, but from the side, it looks like a little bit skewed and just a little weird. This was huge a few years ago. I don't know if you guys seen this Bot and Dolly video, but it works really well for this perspective warping, and it uses these industrial automobile robots with these like panels on them. And then there's projectors that are also on panels to like, or on robots kind of behind here. And then the key here is that there's another robot that is the camera. So they have a 3D viewpoint of where this camera needs to be rendered, so the effect looks absolutely perfect. Obviously this was like a bit of a tech demo for the technology behind these robots, and but this like got so much traction online just because it was such a well done effect. Yeah. I'm going to show a couple more things here as far as like this render perspective, because we are on the same track of like perspective of a viewer. For this light capsule I did, most of the visuals were only visible from this low kind of 45-degree angle. If you got to the right, the building blocked it. Like you really couldn't look at this except if you were right here. So what I ended up doing was playing a little bit with that 3D. So flat template. As I mentioned last class, you kind of always want to start with like a perfectly flat source, because then you can warp it really easily. I outlined the old ad that used to be there. Again, this is part of my restoration of bringing these old ads back to life using projection. If you are doing 3D effects, going into a surface is always easier than trying to force a perspective coming out from a surface, because you can only really have the surface to deal with. So even this sort of effect here, I could simulate this sort of like 3D tessellation effect off the wall, and it will look pretty well, but if I'm trying to force it, it works really well going in versus out. So this is a good example of like that kind of cutting into a surface versus this going out. Like again, the building stopped here, so I couldn't really sell the effect because I didn't have a canvas for it. This, however, I could sort of sell because the building stopped here. I still had canvas for like cars to kind of extrude. But I focused on this sort of effect here of a point light in 3D that's rendered out. And then I had this sort of fill where the letters kind of extrude a little bit versus just having like a flat. So then I took that render and warped it back to my flat content template. So a bit weird to think about, but you're actually rendering it out, the view that you want from the perspective, and then flattening it again before you warp it again. And there's another hidden layer in there, used cars, that I found too. But this is what it ends up looking like, which is really cool to kind of feel like, oh, it is kind of going carved into the building. Again, black and white helps really well for this high contrast, kind of, it looks like a spotlight, looks like it's actually carved out. And then this is from that view perspective again. So I controlled that view perspective. I can render things going kind of in a Z space back into the building, as well as sort of the flat here. And it worked really well, but also because I had that viewer perspective controlled. Logistics, I wanted to touch on this as well, as we were talking about previs and like building into all this stuff. This was something I did for a client in San Francisco where I gave them options, because most of the time you're like, okay, how much does this client want to spend, ranging from literally $13,000 over here for 9,000 lumens, or $1,300 for an Optima that's pretty similar to one of these down here. There's a lot of ambient light in there, so you can kind of guide them along this route of like, here's another model that's like 6,000 lumens, and trying to get a sense of what projector would work here lensing wise. Again, you don't necessarily have to go overkill like this, but it does help to kind of steer a client down like, you know, we want to do something really bright. They ended up being like, just, we want to go balls to the wall, and I ended up, the dealer, Meyer Pro, that I worked with, the price was a little lower than that, so it helped to kind of like work out what lens we're going to use and everything. But again, projectors they really range as far as brightness goes. This is also some previs that I did in Disguise, which is that media server, very next level media server deployment for, you know, Lady Gaga shows and for like any sort of big live installations. And what's great is they actually have this simulator for brightness, as well as getting like an assumption of where a projector could go and what the brightness looks like, what shadows are. Like you can see this pipe here we had to avoid, which turns out we couldn't avoid it. So we had to embrace that and just block out all content so it didn't hit that pole. But I also here knew, okay, I need the projector to come down enough so I can avoid the second pipe. So I'm choosing between pipes. Again, this is all like very like specific information for permanent installations and logistics of where I'm going to put the projector. And then I kind of gave this sort of diagram to an integrator as far as, hey, this projector has to come down this far. You know, the lens shift needs to go down this way. Overthrow on the table is great. Like giving someone installation, if I'm not gonna be there to help support this, and this was like right in the middle of 2020, where like even San Francisco was locked down and integrators were kind of like, we can't really go anywhere. And they were like, no, we'll make this work, and the office is closed. So there was a lot of logistics to hurdle as far as like, how do we go into these spaces to install? But this was done with a Lightform LFC, which is connected to a camera, and I could actually look remotely to take a scan and then author all of my content, and I didn't even have to be there. So that was really, really cool. Brilliant, this is at the Neon Museum. This is a permanent installation I have in Las Vegas. Structured light enabled all of this. So great example of the background of figuring this all out. I had to pitch, we need 2 towers here. We need 8 projectors for this amount of coverage to get all of these amount of signs. And this one is gonna be portrait mode. So again, it's like a huge puzzle to kind of figure this all out. I also adjusted like this sign here, we ended up moving, so we had more of like a straight on hit. This horseshoe sign here was turned 45 degrees, so there's like slight adjustments I was able to do, but otherwise we just had stuff. You can see an old Arby's sign back there. This is the Neon Museum in Vegas. If you ever have a chance to go, it's such a cool place with all these old signs of Vegas. I also was in Blender trying to figure out what the outputs looked like. So this famous example here is great because I'm going to show some structured light example for it, but the lensing, again, I know the distance, I know the throw ratio, so I can assume, like, based on this photogrammetry model, what overthrow I'm going to have, and can assume like coverage for signs. But ended up absolutely beautiful. That was me vectorizing every single little bit. And then I like the evidence of the technology behind here. So as you're sort of saying, like, why do this in real life? Like, this is a great example of, you see the pixels, you can kind of see how it's done when you get up close, but from far enough away, it just looks like bulbs are still working again. Let me swing back to, I know I showed this last class, but since I just showed that, I wanted to show the famous example here, which is somewhere hidden in here. Yeah, here we go. So by now, you know what this looks like. This is just a test pattern of MadMapper. And then you know what this looks like. This is structured light scanning on those old signs, which again looks so cool on like a very complex surface and not just a flat whiteboard. But really, really beautiful. And what that outputs to was this. So this was combining a few different scans where I had the projector to the right and left, the camera to the right and left of the lens. Because the other thing of thinking about is if your camera is kind of to the side of a projector, you're not able to see like behind over here a little bit. So you kind of want to take scans from multiple angles to kind of get around any sort of shadows. And then in Photoshop, combine them all together. But again, this was my canvas. This was my template. I made all the content for all shows on 8 of these in After Effects. And then this is the result. We had some slight mesh warping, but the tubes are being hit with light, the bulbs are getting hit with light, and none of these signs work. It's all just projection mapping. Hopefully this has been helpful of not like demystifying mapping. It's like pretty easy once you're just mapping, 2D things. You can warp really easily. Taking a structured light scan can then get you out of MadMapper completely, and then you're in After Effects, you're in Premiere, like really whatever. Time to remap. The other thing of like, moving a projector slightly and then you have to start over. But cues and scenes and controls, getting one of these is really helpful and fun to be able to like control, control your work. Anyway, I just talked for a bit, so I'm gonna walk around if you guys wanna keep mapping some stuff, or if you have any questions as you're working out. I've gone over pretty much everything I wanted to touch on. The big thing is, again, structured light. 3D is like pretty niche use case, but structured light is huge if you wanna just use a webcam on a surface and then you can work on your laptop instead of staring at a wall. So, yeah, any other questions? Yeah?
Thank you.
Sweet, yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
Nice, thank you all.